Hi everyone, thanks so much for tuning in. This is Kathy, and today I'll be creating a card doing some paper piecing as well as some Copic coloring. I started out with one of the rainbow stamps from the Bright Side stamp set by Pink and Main, and I stamped it on a rainbow of colors from the Itsy Bitsy Polka Dot 6x6 paper pad from My Favorite Things. I am using My Favorite Things Extreme Black Hybrid ink. Once I stamped the rainbow on all of the colored cardstock, I stamped it once more on a piece of 80-pound Nina Solar White cardstock. That's what I'll be using to put my paper pieces on. And then I also stamped an extra cloud. After I had all of the stamping done, I used my scissors to fussy cut out the stripes for the rainbow. And while I was doing the fussy cutting, I was paying attention to cut very close to the stamped line, if not on the stamped line, just to make sure that they fit nicely on the stamped image on the white cardstock. I used liquid glue to do my paper piecing, and after I was done with that, I did run it through my die cut machine with the coordinating die. I had planned on cutting it out anyway, but I thought I could get a head start by running it through my die cut machine, so all I had to do was trim off the extra white border that was around the rainbow. Once I was done trimming off the excess white cardstock, I used a black marker to go around the edge of the rainbow to clean up some of the not so clean cut edges that I had done with my scissors. I set that aside and started working on the other bits and pieces for the rest of the card. I had previously cut a white rectangle frame using 2 stitched rectangle dies and thought that I could use it for this card since I didn't use it for the project that it was intended for. I had another white rectangle and I wanted to make sure that the frame covered the edges of it, so I used a piece of Scotch removable tape to hold it in place, and then I was able to get the placement of that little skunk right where I wanted it to be. Once I had the skunk where I wanted it to be stamped, I pulled out my stamp positioner and picked up the stamp with the lid and removed the white frame to make sure that it didn't interfere with the stamping, and so I could put the second magnet down to hold the cardstock in place. And while I had the stamp in the stamp platform, I decided that I might as well stamp it onto a piece of white scratch paper so that I can cut out a mask. I will often have an idea for a card, but very rarely do I have a plan from beginning to end. I definitely do not have ducks in a row. I have squirrels, and they're almost always over caffeinated. So after I stamped the skunk off camera, I was kind of playing with the layout of how I was envisioning this card and decided that I needed to add a sun to go behind my rainbow. So I stamped the sun from the Bright Side stamp set onto a piece of Nina Solar White cardstock, colored it in with some yellow Copics, and then fussy cut that out. And I did the same thing with the sun and the cloud as I had done with the rainbow and gone around the edges with a black marker. I am using a water-based marker to make sure that the black ink doesn't bleed into the Copics. So back to the little panel with the skunk, I very quickly freehand cut a mask so that I could have a green hillside and then a blue sky. I put the mask in place for the skunk and just used painter's tape to hold down my not so fancy mask, and did a little bit of ink blending with Mowed Lawn Distress Oxide ink. I wasn't too worried about having a perfect blend. I just wanted to add a little bit of color so that my skunk didn't look like she was just floating in the air. After I was done with the grass, I removed the mask and used the other piece that I had cut to mask off the grass so that I could do a blue sky. And for the sky, I used Tumbled Glass Oxide ink, and the brushes that I'm using are makeup brushes that I picked up from Amazon. I'll make sure to have everything linked below. Once I was done with the ink blending, it was time to start coloring in the little skunk. And while I do the coloring, when I switch marker colors, the colors that I'm using will pop up in the top left-hand corner for you. And here I'm going to go and finish off that tangent that I started in my last video about Copics Not sure how I got so off track, but I did because, well, as I mentioned, no ducks, just over-caffeinated squirrels. So I had read an article about refilling markers and how they're supposed to weigh a certain amount. So I decided that I was gonna buy a scale, which was quite possibly the best $9 investment ever. And it has made a huge difference. I had a tendency to underfill my markers because I was so afraid of overfilling them and having ink blob all over my project. And I found that I really thought that I was filling them enough. And when I got the scale and started to weigh my Copics, I had some of them that weighed in at 12 grams. And a full sketch marker should weigh between 13.9 to 14.1 grams. And it really has made a big difference. And I noticed it especially with coloring the skunk here. The cardstock was saturated a lot faster, which made the blending a lot smoother. So I'm really glad that I invested the $9 in that scale. And after I'd filled all of the markers that I had refills for, I actually weighed all of the markers that I don't have refills for so that I could prioritize what refills I need to purchase first. So I guess I don't get any new colors to add to my collection. I'm just going to be concentrating on getting all of those markers refilled. And speaking of refilling markers, this one I had refilled before I got the scale and ended up overfilling it. So that's why I removed the cap off of the chisel tip side to equalize the pressure in the barrel to make sure that I didn't get a big blob of ink on the skunk. So that's about all I wanted to share with you about refilling Copic markers and using a scale to make it a lot easier. And while I finish up the coloring, I'll go ahead and play some music for you to enjoy, and I'll be back soon. I wanted to finish off the spectrum of the rainbow and add in some purple, so I colored the flower purple as well as the bow in her hair. And I used a stitched rectangle die to die cut the purple polka dot cardstock. And I adhered that to the front of a top folding A2 size note card. And I used just my tape runner to attach the sun to the back of the rainbow, and then used just a tiny little bit so that the rainbow would stick to the frame. I put down a whole bunch of foam tape around that frame and adhered that to the front of the card. And then I wanted to add in that second cloud, so I put some foam tape on the right side of the cloud and used a tape runner on the left side of the cloud so that it would be flush with the rainbow and the other cloud. And to add a little bit of sparkle, I used my Wink of Stella glitter pen and went over the sun, the clouds, the flower, and the bow on her hair. Next, I used a white gel pen just to clean up a few spots around where I got out of the lines a little bit. And to brighten up her eyes, I used a fine tip black pen just to make them stand out a little bit more. And that finishes up my card for today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you've not yet subscribed, I'd love it if you would. And don't forget to ring the bell so you're notified every time a new video is posted. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.